Hello and welcome to Diecast Diaries. I'm Dan. Now, after my last couple of videos, which were a slight departure from what I normally do, I did say we'd get back to some military matters, and that's what I've got to have a look at tonight. Now, also in both of those unboxing videos I've recently done, I did kind of state that Hot Wheels were never my favourite diecast manufacturer out of all the kind of major ones. But that's not to say that I don't like them at all. And there are, in fact, a number of castings, mainly from the 70s and 80s, admittedly, that I do genuinely like. And that does include a small range of military vehicles that they did. Now, the range of military vehicles that Hot Wheels did was nowhere near as extensive as the likes of Matchbox, etc. But unfortunately, I don't have the full range. They are less common over here, I would say. But I do have 8 different models to sort of show you tonight. I just thought it'd be quite interesting to have a look at. As I say, a bit similar to the Johnny Lightning video I did a couple of weeks back. I thought they're probably less commonly seen over here. And in fact, all the 8 castings that I've got, they all came from eBay and they all came from the US again as well. So again, the ones that I've had for a reasonable while. So the military models were first introduced in the mid-70s, and I think initially they were just part of the normal Hot Wheels range. And then in 1985, they were re-released under the name of Action Command, and they all featured this same card art here of what is obviously, I think, supposed to be an M60 tank, which is kind of appropriate, as that's the first model I've got to have a look at. So this is it in question. Now, as I say, it is definitely an M60 tank, but Hot Wheels being Hot Wheels, they didn't call it that. And the model's actually been known by a couple of names. And the first one was Tough Customer. And you can see underneath, there you go, Tough Customer. Well, this particular one, it's got 1974 on the underneath. I think it was actually released in 1975. This is the earlier version. It was later re-released in 1985 under the Action Command name as Big Bertha. So neither of those names are particularly serious, and of course neither of them kind of give any clue as to what the actual vehicle is. All of the Hot Wheels military vehicles have kind of slightly daft names, some better than others, but none of them give any kind of hint as to what the vehicle is. But pleasingly, they are at least all real military vehicles. None of them are kind of made up. So yes, this is Tough Customer, as it was called in the mid-70s. So as I say, it's an M60 tank. It's a pretty basic casting. The whole lower bit, apart from the chassis, is metal, including the cast tracks. But the tracks are kind of quite nicely moulded, and they've done some sort of good detail with the sprocket wheel at the back, like it is on the M60. The entire turret is plastic. It does mean that the colours don't quite match, so this is a common problem when there's a mixture of kind of metal and plastic. It does at least mean that the gun barrel is done in green, though, which is a kind of an improvement over like the Corgi Junior's Centurion, for example, where it's a black turret. At least it's the same colour as the rest of the vehicle. Like most track vehicles in this scale, it's got sort of simple wheels underneath just to enable it to run along the carpet. So this tank was produced until 1997. As far as I'm aware, Big Bertha was the last name it was known by. It must have been known under that name for a while. There are, I think, a few different variations of it. I think this is the only one I've got. As I say, I don't think Hot Wheels over here, the military vehicles, were particularly common. I don't remember seeing them on sale anywhere. But yeah, this is the first one. It's obviously has a rotating turret. Now, what they've actually done is, as I say, there is a nice bit of detail on this that identifies it as an M60, one of which is this cupola on the top that has an inbuilt machine gun, which is a feature of some models of the M60. And they've actually moulded it on this, although they have done it in this case, pointing to the rear, which is a bit of I suppose, I think the machine gun would be kind of a separate piece otherwise, and obviously it'd be quite fragile in this scale. Just a very generic US Army sticker on the front with a kind of a spurious kind of serial number for it and a C4, I guess an individual vehicle number or something like that. So that's the first one, as I say, known as Tough Customer and also known as Big Bertha, but what in actuality is an M60 tank. And then released the following year, and another one given a bit of a daft name. This one was known as Oh Shoot when it was first released in 1976. Then it became Shell Shocker when it was re-released in 1984, and this model would carry on being produced until 1994. Now, I don't think this one states underneath. No, this one doesn't have a name at all underneath it. But I'm guessing that this is the early release, so I'm guessing this would be the Oh Shoot one. So I didn't quite manage to find out what exact vehicle this is based on, but it will be a real one. It does seem to have the exact same casting underneath of the same as the Tough Customer tank. It's certainly got the same sticker on the front, so it's just a bit of a cheat from Hot Wheels just using the same sticker on it. Again, it's quite nicely moulded. There's quite a nice detail on the tracks there. The gun again is plastic, but I do think it kind of the colours kind of go better on this one than on the tank. The paintwork on the metal looks a little bit glossy. It's not too bad on here. It's a bit more of a matte finish, which is quite nice. So yeah, it's some kind of 155mm self-propelled gun. Obviously, a solid gun barrel. You can't really expect it to be hollowed out in this kind of scale. And as I say, it is kind of quite a simple toy, really. So that's or shoot, also known as shell shocker. But as I say, it's a self-propelled 155mm gun. So as I say, that was in production until about 1994. And again, there will be kind of a couple of different variants of that. Given how much I've probably said in a few videos before now, I like American Halftracks. This one would probably be my favourite out of the few Hot Wheels military vehicles I've got. So this one was known as Gun Bucket when it was first released in 1976. Again, it was renamed in 1984 to become Tank Gunner, and it was produced. This one actually ended up having civilian versions done of it, which I've one example I've got here. So the actual vehicle in question, initially, I'm guessing Hot Wheels were going for an M16 Halftrack, but this one only has two guns. Whether that's whether that was a deliberate decision on Hot Wheels' part, or whether it was found it was just simpler to do it with only two guns. What that does mean is it's the M16's slightly lesser known brother or earlier version of, which was the M30, which was only armed with 250 calibers. It was soon kind of replaced in US Army service in World War II. It just didn't have enough firepower. Obviously, the M16 has double the firepower. So if Hot Wheels did intend doing an M13, then all credit to them, because that's a pretty obscure version. The detail inside is pretty nice. They've got the sort of quite distinctively shaped ammunition cans that would go in either side of the guns. Obviously, you can imagine a vehicle like this is going to kind of go through ammunition like it's going out of fashion. And you've got a couple of spare ones in the corners there. So that's quite nice that they're not just done a basic interior. They have kind of paid attention to what the real vehicle looks like. You see an open compartment. The steering wheel's probably less said about that, the better. But you can even see there are some details moulded on the dashboard, which is quite a nice touch for this scale. Unusually, the armoured windscreen cover is a plastic insert. It's not part of the metal at all. The upper body, again, is all metal. The underneath is plastic, and they've obviously moulded the tracks in plastic, but they have done a nice job of replicating the Halftrack's distinctive suspension. And they've even got the mud flaps at the back there. So this is an early model Halftrack. I looked at it with it having the sort of the larger style headlights on the wheel arches and the anti-ditching roller on the front instead of the more usual winch. Again, you've got some nice detail on the side. They've even kind of moulded the fold-down sides that were a feature of both the M13 and the M16, obviously to give the gun a clearer field of fire. Got the same on the other side. And again, you've got the usual things, Pioneer tools, tow cables, things like that, jerry cans on the side, battery box and axe. So yeah, some quite nice detail on this one, but yeah, another daft name. So yeah, as I say, that casting was actually produced until 1998, but the later versions, they actually did several different civilian versions of it, and this was one of them. So this is Snow Patrol, and I think it was just released. It still says the sort of 1976 date on the underneath. So the casting is exactly the same. You can see even on the inside here, it's just a simple case that they've removed the gun out the back. The casting is the same. It's got the ammo boxes and all that. I think it was meant as a snowplow. I'm not sure this one, I got secondhand unboxed, so I'm not sure if it ever originally came with any kind of a snowplow blade or anything like that. But there were several different versions of the Halftrack done in sort of civilian colour schemes, which is a bit unusual, I suppose, but I suppose, it's gets more use out of the casting. So that's Snow Patrol. And I say this, I think, will date from the late 90s. That seems to have been when the last version of this casting was produced. So that's that. This next one, this one actually seems to be the earliest of all of them, and this seems to be one that wasn't re-released under the Action Command name. So it was initially released in 1975 and seemed to be only in production until 1977. Now, although they are all based on real military vehicles, as I say, this is the only one that's a conversion of an existing casting. So Hot Wheels did kind of a standard Willys type Jeep, It is quite a sort of simple casting, but it's got the distinctive kind of front end with the round headlights. No spare wheel on the back, which obviously Jeeps kind of usually have, but they have moulded what is, I suppose, quite an oversized jerry can on the back. So this was an alteration of an existing casting. Basically, all they've done, apart from the paint job, obviously, is put a new plastic insert in, and the Jeep is now mounting a rather large recoilless rifle, which was something that Jeeps were commonly armed with. Not in World War II, although it does have a World War II invasion star on. The recoilless rifle would be a post-war feature. You can see they've even got some shells kind of stored in there for ready use. The gun is quite nicely detailed. They've got the sort of wheel on the side for elevating and depressing it. The breech that would be opened at the back to put the shell in. It's all quite nicely detailed, and the gun does obviously elevate and traverse from side to side. The model in question is actually known as Gunslinger, which I suppose is a slightly more appropriate name and a slightly less daft name than the ones that have come before it. So, yeah, there is another Jeep that was introduced later on that was kind of as an unarmed one. It was kind of more of a civilian type Jeep with a roll cage on the back, but Hot Wheels released it in Army colours as well, and that one was known as Roll Patrol. That's not one I have. This one, at least, is a sort of obviously a far more military-looking one. But yeah, this one seems to have only been in production for a couple of years. So that's Gunslinger. The original casting was called Grasshopper. I think there's like at least one variant of it was in like a sort of purple colour. The next vehicle is a really random one for Hot Wheels to do. Again, the name gives absolutely no clue as to what it is. This was known as Assault Crawler. Now, this was introduced. This was, I think, there's one that first came out under the Action Command name. It was first released in 1987 and was in production for 10 years. Again, there will be probably a couple of different variants of it. The vehicle in question, it's actually a fairly obscure one, really. So it's World War II. It's an M4 high-speed tractor. The Hot Wheels model, it's not terrible. It's a lot taller and thinner than the real vehicle. I say the real one's a lot more kind of, as I say, wider and definitely lower looking. This one looks quite top heavy, really. But they've done, again, a nice job. The underneath, obviously, is all plastic again, and the top's metal. Nice job of replicating the tracks underneath. So the M4 high-speed tractor, it was built by Alice Chalmers. I think it used an alteration of the Stuart tank chassis, and it was used as an artillery tractor for towing obviously large artillery pieces, large field guns and howitzers. Quite a successful vehicle. It could obviously tow quite large guns up to 155mm or 8-inch caliber. And the gun crew would be carried on the inside here. The real vehicle did have a little crane on the back for lifting up ammunition, and it would be armed with a 50 caliber machine gun, which this one does have. So it's quite a nice one, this. I'd say it's probably my second favourite, simply because of the fact it's just such an unusual vehicle for Hot Wheels to have chosen. No markings on this one at all, just kind of quite a nice sort of camouflage pattern. So yeah, again, obviously, because it's a track vehicle, just got the wheels underneath for ease of pushing on the carpet. So that's the Assault Crawler. But yeah, quite nice and very unusual to get a model or a toy even of an M4 high-speed tractor. Well, that's what it is. So yeah, that's the Assault Crawler. And then the last three that I've got, they're all actually the same casting. There's just three different versions of it from obviously different years. So it was known as Troop Convoy. And as you can see, it's just kind of a standard US Army truck. I believe it's actually an M34 6x6 truck, which would have come into service in the 50s. It's the earlier type, as opposed to the M35, which is probably more widely known, as this one has the cutout in the rear bed for the wheels. So it's a 2.5-ton 6x6 truck. This is what replaced the famous GMC of World War II fame. And this was the first version. So this was released. This is another one that I think was only first released under the Action Command name. So this was in production from 1984 to 1996. So I've got three different versions here, all military ones. I think there were, again, a couple that were done in civilian colours, must have been obviously towards the end of its production run. So this first one in this kind of tan colour is from 1984. It's, I would say, probably the best one in terms of accuracy of the actual model. Proportions look pretty good. Markings are good. It's got a standard star on the bonnet in US Army. The lower half is all plastic. The top half of the cab and the windscreen is plastic. And obviously the rear cover is plastic. And then you've got the backrests in here, which are as well. But it's very nicely done. The front end looks very good. They've sort of captured the look of it sort of nicely with the kind of distinctive front end that these trucks have. So that's the first version in this kind of tan colour. And then in 1985, this is my favourite of the three. It was released in this kind of really nice olive colour. Kind of slightly unusual that they've done the sort of a similar camouflage pattern to on the assault crawler, but only on the top of the tilt. Again, it's just got the same markings on the bonnet, the star, and the US Army. But yeah, looks really good with the nice sort of blacked out wheels. I suppose that's one thing that a couple of the earlier ones, it would have been nice if they blacked the wheels out on those, but obviously they're just kind of standard Hot Wheels ones from the wheels from the time. But yeah, the black wheels on these kind of look a lot better. So again, with this one, obviously the top comes off. You've got the backrest inside. But yeah, I think that's a nice one. As I say, that's certainly my favourite of the three of these that I've got. And then this is the last one. This one seems to have been much more recent. Well, I say that. It's from 1992, so you're still talking well over 30 years old. So again, exactly the same mould. Again, they've just got kind of a camouflage pattern on the top. I'm wondering with this one being from 1992, it was deliberately brought out in this colour scheme because of the recent Gulf War, where trucks like this, although the later versions of, would have been in use, obviously in this kind of colour scheme. But again, that's a nice one. I think that's my second favourite of the two. I think the colour of this one just looks maybe a bit too sort of yellowish, really. I think most sort of desert camouflage military vehicles are more kind of this sort of colour. So yeah, so that's the troop convoy. And as I say, this was in production until 1996. But as I say, I think the latter versions of this were in kind of civilian colours. But yeah, so that's all the ones I've got. There are some other military vehicles that Hot Wheels do. As I said before, there's another version of the Jeep. There's a couple of civilian castings that they redid in military colours. There's a van that was known as Combat Medic, obviously done as an ambulance. A couple of them are particularly rare. They're not, in terms of military vehicles, particularly accurate, but they did an Oldsmobile as like a staff car, although it's a bit of a muscle car, really. And they also did a sort of a custom type van as in military police markings, I think. Yeah, both of those are quite rare. I'd like to get them, obviously, if I could, but with them being sort of quite expensive and them not being as military as these, I'm kind of quite happy with the ones I've got. But as I say, they're not particularly easy to come across. These weren't too expensive, but then I've had these for probably getting on for 20 years, or certainly coming up to 20 years. They were a relatively early purchase after I'd kind of joined eBay in the early 2000s. And as I say, they will have come from the States. So they don't really come up that often in the UK. So all the ones I've got, unfortunately, are unboxed. But as I say, that was the kind of carding that they came on. So yeah, so that's all I've got. But I thought they'd be quite an interesting one to have a look at. Next sort of, although it's kind of going back into military matters, it does kind of follow on from the videos I've done recently where I was unboxing a load of obviously similar scale, similar size Matchbox castings, and obviously the last actual video I did where I unboxed the Hot Wheels Premium Jaws Chevy Blazer. So yeah, as I say, Hot Wheels, although they're not my favourite one, not my favourite brand, there are at least a number of castings that they've done over the years that I do like. One other range that Hot Wheels did, although it's not military, but it's one that dates from the 80s, is the Workhorses range, which, as the name suggests, is sort of commercial, utility, construction and emergency type vehicles. That's one I've got quite a few examples of. I am trying to sort of get the whole range. So at some point, I would like to do a video on those. So as I say, just kind of prove that, it's not that I dislike Hot Wheels, but I would say I definitely like them a lot less than Matchbox and a lot of the others. So not sure at the moment what I'm going to do for my next video. As I say, I'll probably continue with a few more military things. But yeah, so for the time being, that's my small array of Hot Wheels military vehicles. And in the meantime, please do like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you all very soon. Bye.